Joining me now is Aurel Braun. He's a Professor of Political Science and International Relations at the University of Toronto. Aurel, thank you very much for your time. Now, is NATO expansion a product and expression rather, of US power, or is it Russian aggression that is driving its potential growth?
The Finnish president made a statement that I think touches on that issue. He said to Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin government that you need to look at the mirror to explain this development. In other words, what he was saying was that Russia brought this upon itself. And this is why this is so very damaging to Russia. It is not only damaging because this will basically double the border with NATO, and that the Finns especially will bring very capable military forces, even though they're a small country. But rather, these are two states, Finland and Sweden, that for decades had tried very hard to really have good relations with Russia. The population of these countries before the invasion did not want to join NATO. And this had turned around. So it tells us something about the very negative unintended consequences of this invasion and about the magnitude of Mr. Putin's strategic miscalculation.
So let me pick up on that point. We know, of course, the path is set for Sweden and Finland to be NATO members by the end of the year. But how can Turkey's concerns be addressed and overcome? What kind of concessions will NATO countries need to make?
President Erdogan is a very savvy and tough negotiator. He had opposed the appointment of the Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg as well, and then they reached a compromise. So there's certain things that he wants. He wants the NATO countries, including the new ones, if Sweden becomes one, to be tougher on Kurdish rebels, because that is a prime concern. He probably wants to have more security given to Turkey. And here, too, we see that Mr. Erdogan had very good relations with Vladimir Putin, and those relations have soured. So whatever he wants in terms of security from NATO is balanced against the other element is that those relations that Turkey had with Russia, which were really strong relations, have gone south. That those relations now represent a kind of image, where whether it is allies or adversaries, Russia looks toxic.
It looks like Turkey is willing to be a little malleable on the topic at this point. In terms of Russia's potential retaliation, it's saying that it will deploy nuclear weapons in the Baltic. How threatening is a move like this compared to something, say, a disinformation and cyber attack campaign that the Kremlin could certainly launch?
It's not inconceivable that the Kremlin will act along the entire spectrum, whether it is cyber warfare, whether it is economic pressure. As it was noted in your program, they already are stopping the sale of electricity, which represents something like 10% of the electricity consumed by Finland. The question is whether this will be effective. And the Russian threats, which may be credible before the catastrophic performance of the Russian military, those are no longer as credible. So they may have the opposite effect. That is, the more Russia tries to pressure these countries, the more it will drive them to speed up their rearmament. And Sweden had disarmed to an extraordinary level. They reduced their military forces after the end of the Cold War by something like 70%. Now they're busy rearming. So the Kremlin needs to ask itself whether the tools that they had used before that were able to intimidate countries, whether those tools work any longer or are going to have really unintended and very damaging consequences.
Aurel, thank you very much for your time. Aurel Braun there, Professor of Political Sciences and International Relations at the University of Toronto.